The day started like any other. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dense jungle. The air was thick with heat, the kind that made even the bravest warriors sweat through their armor. Sergeant Liam Rivers had seen enough of this planet's harsh environment to know that today would be no different from the countless other days he had spent fighting off alien threats. Liam and his unit had been stationed on this planet for months now. The Vulpine, an alien species that looked like fierce humanoid foxes, had been the primary target of their mission. At first, the humans thought the Vulpine were just another alien species trying to invade. But as time passed, the true nature of the war began to unfold. The Vulpine were not mindless creatures. They were intelligent, strong, and more importantly, they were survivors. They had their own world, their own lands, but something had driven them away. Now the human forces were stuck in the middle of a fight that was about survival, not conquest. They had no idea why the Vulpine attacked them, but they knew one thing for sure. They had to fight back. Liam, standing on the edge of their camp, looked out over the terrain. His fingers brushed the edge of his rifle. The Vulpine had launched another attack just the night before, and this time it had been personal. One of Liam's friends, Private Kyle, hadn't made it back to the base. The Vulpine had taken him. Just like they had taken so many before, the rest of the men were still shaking off the loss, but Liam knew that there was no time to mourn. The Vulpine were out there, and they weren't going to stop until they had wiped out every last one of them. The war had escalated, and the humans had no choice but to fight back with everything they had. Liam's thoughts were interrupted by a loud noise. A roar echoed through the trees, sending a chill down his spine. It wasn't the usual roar of a wild animal. This was something different, something that made even the bravest soldier hesitate. He turned to look back at the others. They had heard it too. "We need to move," Liam said, his voice steady. "Get ready, everyone. It's coming." His team quickly moved into position, setting up defenses and securing the perimeter. The jungle was silent now, but the strange roar continued to echo through the trees, growing louder with each passing second. It was only a matter of time before the Vulpine struck again. Liam checked his rifle one last time before he stepped into the dense foliage. The others followed closely behind him, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. They had to be ready for anything, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found. As they made their way through the jungle, Liam's heart raced with every step. The trees parted ahead, revealing a small clearing. And there, standing in the center of the clearing, was something that looked like it had come straight from the nightmares of every soldier who had ever set foot on this planet. It was massive, an apex predator of the planet. A creature so dangerous that even the Vulpine had learned to fear it. Its skin was covered in scales that shimmered in the light, and its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, reflecting the sunlight like two lanterns in the dark. It was the kind of creature that could tear through the toughest armor with ease. And standing next to it was a Vulpine warrior. She was tall, her body covered in black and silver armor that seemed to blend with the shadows of the jungle. Her fiery red hair glowed brightly, and her sharp amber eyes stared at the apex predator with a mixture of awe and something else fear. Liam froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. The Vulpine warrior didn't seem to notice them at first. She was too focused on the predator. Her hand gripped the hilt of a massive weapon, ready for battle, but the creature didn't make a move. Then, to Liam's shock, the human soldier beside him stepped forward. It wasn't a planned move. It wasn't a signal. It was just instinct. Without saying a word, Liam watched as the soldier drew his weapon and prepared to fire at the creature. But before he could pull the trigger, the Vulpine warrior spoke, her voice calm but filled with authority. "No," she said, her gaze fixed on the soldier. "You don't understand." Liam's team stood in stunned silence as they tried to process what was happening. The Vulpine warrior stepped toward the predator, her hand slowly reaching for the massive creature's side. With one swift motion, she drove her knife into the beast's scales. The animal roared in pain, but the warrior didn't back away. Instead, she pulled out a large piece of flesh, offering it to the human soldier. Liam's mind spun. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Vulpine, the enemies they had been fighting for so long, weren't just attacking humans. They were interacting with them in a way that defied everything he had been told about them. The Vulpine girl was feeding the soldier the meat of the planet's apex predator, as though it was a simple meal. The soldier hesitated, his hand still gripping the weapon, but then something in his eyes changed. His mouth opened slightly, and he accepted the offering. He took the piece of meat from the warrior, staring at it as if he couldn't understand what had just happened. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This wasn't about fighting the Vulpine. This was something bigger, something far more complicated. And for the first time, Liam wondered if he could trust the Vulpine after all. Liam stood frozen, his rifle still in his hands, his mind struggling to make sense of what he had just witnessed. The Vulpine warrior had done the unthinkable. She had not only spared the apex predator, but had also offered its flesh to the human soldier. And now here they were, both standing in the middle of the jungle, a predator at their feet and an uneasy alliance forming between them. The soldier, still holding the piece of meat, slowly lowered his weapon. His gaze shifted from the Vulpine warrior to the piece of meat in his hand, as if he was unsure whether to eat it or discard it. The entire situation felt wrong, and yet, Liam couldn't deny the strange pull of curiosity that gripped him. What was the Vulpine warrior thinking? Why had she offered this soldier a meal, something so precious and dangerous in their world? The Vulpine girl, her fiery red hair glowing even more brightly against the dark jungle backdrop, seemed to sense the confusion in the human soldier. She took a step forward, her sharp amber eyes locking onto his. There was no malice in her gaze, only a calmness that felt almost unnatural for a warrior who had been part of a race known for its fierce and relentless fighting. "You think we're just monsters," she said, her voice low but clear. "But you're wrong." Liam's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time one of the Vulpine had spoken to him directly. He had heard stories of their merciless ways, how they would tear through enemies with a speed and viciousness unmatched by anything on their planet. But this was something different. The soldier still hadn't said a word. His hand trembled slightly as he held the meat, unsure of what to do next. "You've been fed lies," the Vulpine warrior continued, stepping closer to the soldier. "We are not what you think we are. I'm not here to kill you." Liam couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of trick. Could it be possible that after all the bloodshed, the Vulpine weren't the mindless savages they had been made out to be? Could they really be so different from the enemy he had been taught to fight? The soldier finally spoke, his voice shaky, but filled with disbelief. "Then why the war? Why kill us?" The Vulpine warrior's expression softened, but there was still a fierce edge to her words. "It wasn't our choice. We had no choice but to fight for survival. Your people came here seeking to take what was ours. We only fought to protect ourselves." Liam felt a chill run down his spine. The Vulpine weren't invaders. They weren't the aggressors in this war. His mind began to race, trying to process the gravity of her words. Could it be true? Had they been fighting the wrong enemy all along? Behind him, the rest of the soldiers were starting to stir, unsure of what to do. The Vulpine warrior's calm demeanor was unsettling, and the piece of meat in the soldier's hands seemed to symbolize something bigger, something beyond the war they had been fighting. Liam stepped forward, his voice low but filled with a new sense of purpose. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his mind still grappling with the idea that everything he had been taught about the Vulpine might be wrong. The warrior turned her gaze on him, her amber eyes glowing even in the dim light. "We want peace," she said simply. "We want to stop the bloodshed, to end this war that never should have started." Liam blinked, processing her words. The concept of peace had never felt so foreign in this brutal world of war. How could he trust her? How could he trust any of them? But at the same time, a seed of doubt had been planted in his mind. If what she said was true, then the war they had been waging was built on lies, on fear, and on misunderstanding. He turned to the soldier holding the meat. The man's face was pale, his eyes wide, and his hand still gripped the meat as if it were a weapon rather than food. His confusion mirrored Liam's own. "This wasn't how war was supposed to be. We're not your enemies," the Vulpine warrior said, her voice gentle but firm. "But if you continue to fight us, then we will be. We have no choice but to defend our lives." Liam felt his heart beat faster. This wasn't just a question of survival anymore. This was about something bigger, something deeper. Could he really let go of everything he had been taught? Could he trust this Vulpine warrior? Could he believe that peace was possible? The soldier who had been holding the meat slowly took a bite. His eyes didn't leave the Vulpine warrior's face. It was as if he was testing her, testing the possibility of her words. When he finished, he wiped his mouth and finally spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "You want us to trust you?" The Vulpine warrior nodded. "Yes, but trust goes both ways. If we don't start somewhere, then we'll be stuck in this endless cycle of violence." The soldier put the remaining piece of meat down, finally lowering his weapon. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to believe you, but maybe we should talk. Maybe there's a way to end this." Liam took a deep breath. The war they were fighting wasn't just a war of survival anymore. It was a war of beliefs, of perceptions, and of misunderstandings. Could they really stop fighting? Could they find common ground with an enemy that they had been taught to hate? As the Vulpine warrior and the human soldier stood in the jungle, their unlikely connection beginning to form, Liam realized that this was only the beginning. The future of their world, of both human and Vulpine, was uncertain. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope for peace. Liam stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as the human soldier and the Vulpine warrior exchanged tense words. The air between them felt thick with uncertainty. It was clear that something had shifted in the atmosphere, but neither side had fully embraced what that shift meant. The soldier who had accepted the meat from the Vulpine warrior had become the focal point of the situation. His actions eating the flesh of the apex predator, the most dangerous creature on this planet, were a powerful symbol. It was no longer just about survival or fighting. It was about understanding and perhaps changing the course of the war. Liam's mind raced as he observed the scene before him. His whole life had been defined by the belief that the Vulpine were enemies, that they were the invaders who had brought destruction to humanity's doorstep. He had seen the brutal raids, the lives lost, the terror in his comrades' eyes. But now, standing in this jungle, with a human soldier accepting food from a Vulpine warrior, it felt like everything he had known was falling apart. The Vulpine warrior, her fiery red hair catching the dim light of the jungle, looked calm, too calm for someone who had just offered a piece of the apex predator to a human soldier. She wasn't the monster he had been trained to fight. She was different. But what did that mean for him, for humanity? Why did you help him? Liam asked, his voice carrying a mix of confusion and suspicion. He couldn't keep the question to himself any longer. Why feed him the predator's flesh? Why not just kill him like you've done with the others? The Vulpine warrior didn't flinch at his words. Her amber eyes softened slightly as she took a step forward, standing tall and proud. "Because that's not what we are," she said quietly. "We've never been what you think we are. And I'm not going to waste another life in this senseless fight." Liam felt a pang in his chest, a mix of disbelief and anger rising within him. The enemy he had spent months fighting against, the ones who had killed his comrades, torn apart entire villages, were now standing in front of him, telling him they weren't the enemy. It was a bitter pill to swallow, one that he wasn't. Sure, he could force down. "You're lying," he said, his words coming out sharper than he intended. "You've attacked us. You've killed us. You've destroyed everything we fought for. How can you say you're not our enemy?" The Vulpine warrior's eyes hardened. "You don't understand," she replied, her voice steady. "You think we came here to destroy you, but we didn't. We were forced to fight, and I won't apologize for defending my people." Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He could feel the anger bubbling inside him, the frustration of years of conflict coming to the surface. How could he accept this? How could he stand here and listen to her claim that the war wasn't their fault? They had attacked humanity without warning, without mercy. But as he looked at her, something in her expression shifted. There was no malice in her eyes, no deceit in her posture. It was like she was genuinely trying to reach him, to make him see something that he had never considered. The soldier who had eaten the meat earlier spoke up, his voice uncertain but thoughtful. "Maybe we've been fighting for the wrong reasons," he said. "Maybe it's time to listen." Liam turned to him, surprised by his words. The soldier had always been one of the toughest men in their unit, the one who never showed fear. And now, here he was, questioning everything they had been fighting for. "You don't understand," Liam said, trying to make sense of the chaos in his own mind. "We've lost so much. I've lost friends, people I cared about. You want us to just forget about that?" The soldier looked at him, his eyes filled with an understanding that made Liam uncomfortable. "I'm not saying we forget," the soldier said softly. "But we need to ask ourselves why we're fighting. If it's just about revenge, then we'll never win. We'll just keep destroying each other until there's nothing left." The words hit Liam like a punch to the gut. He had been fighting this war for so long, fueled by anger and loss. But now, standing here in the jungle, he realized that the very thing that had driven him, his desire for revenge, was the thing that had kept them all trapped in a cycle of violence. He had never stopped to question the true reason for the war. As the moments passed, the Vulpine warrior and the soldier stood together in the clearing, the air between them filled with a fragile truce. The others in the unit had fallen silent, unsure of what to make of the situation. Liam could feel the weight of their eyes on him, waiting for him to make a decision. They had been following him, trusting him to lead them through this conflict. But now he wasn't sure what the right choice was. The Vulpine warrior stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "We don't want war," she said, her voice low but firm. "We want peace, but we need you to listen. If you keep fighting, you'll never understand." Liam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Peace, the word felt strange to him. After everything, peace seemed impossible. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying. He looked at the others in his unit. They were all waiting for him to make a choice, to decide whether they would continue fighting, or whether they would try to forge a new path, one that might lead to an end to the war. Liam had spent so much time fighting for survival, for vengeance. But now, he realized that the only way to survive was to change, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to listen. The jungle felt quieter now, as if the very trees were holding their breath. The decision had been made, and it had come with consequences. Liam had chosen to listen, to entertain the possibility that peace could be achieved. But now that the words were out in the open, there was no going back. The path ahead was uncertain, and with it, the weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. The soldiers, who had been skeptical just moments ago, looked at him with uncertainty in their eyes. They were following him, but they weren't sure where this new road would lead. It wasn't a simple choice to lay down arms. It wasn't just about trusting the Vulpine. It was about questioning everything they had fought for, everything they had believed. Liam felt the burden of their gazes, of the silent pressure to lead them through this unknown terrain. He had been their leader in battle, in survival, but now he had to lead them through something much harder, something that required them to change. To admit that everything they had known about their enemy was wrong. To believe that the war could end. He turned to the Vulpine warrior, her fiery red hair still glowing under the fading light of the jungle. She stood beside him, her eyes focused on something far beyond them, her expression unreadable. "You understand that we can't just stop fighting," Liam said, his voice low, yet full of a new resolve. "There are people who will never accept this. People who think the Vulpine are monsters." The warrior nodded, her amber eyes meeting his. "I understand, it's not going to be easy. But if we don't try, we'll all be destroyed. We have to take the first step." Liam's chest tightened. The words she spoke made sense, but the fear was still there. Could they really change the minds of those who had already been blinded by hatred? Could they convince the other humans to stop fighting, to believe in something that felt so fragile? "We have to start somewhere," the warrior said again, as though reading his thoughts. "We can't win this war through violence. The only way to end it is through understanding, through showing that we are more alike than we are different." Liam shook his head slightly, as if trying to rid himself of the lingering doubts. "And you think we can get the others to listen? The commanders, the leaders? They've been taught to fear you, to hate you." The warrior's gaze softened. "Then we will show them something different. We will show them that peace is possible, even between enemies." Liam felt the weight of her words. She was right. If they were ever going to break the cycle of violence, they needed to start with something as simple as a conversation. But that wasn't going to be easy, not with so much anger on both sides. The soldier who had eaten the apex predator's flesh stepped forward, his face still pale from the shock of the previous events. "Liam, what's our next move?" he asked, his voice uncertain but filled with a sense of purpose. "We've made our choice. Now what comes after?" Liam turned to face his men. They were all waiting for him to lead them forward, to decide what came next. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "We have to talk to the commanders," Liam said, his voice steady but with a hint of hesitation. "We'll go back to the base. We'll explain what happened here. And we'll ask them to listen. If we can get through to them, then maybe we have a chance. If not, then we'll have to figure out another way." The warrior nodded. "We'll stand by you. Together we can make them see that peace is worth fighting for." Liam couldn't help but admire her calm strength. She wasn't just a warrior. She was someone who believed in something more than just survival. She believed in the possibility of change. And for the first time, Liam wondered if maybe he could believe that too. The journey back to the base was long and silent. The soldiers were tense, unsure of what to expect. Even though Liam had made his choice, the path ahead was still fraught with danger. If they couldn't convince the commanders, the war would continue, and more lives would be lost. But as they approached the base, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something had already shifted. The air felt different, charged with a new energy, a fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could happen. They reached the base just as the sun began to set, casting a soft golden light over the camp. The soldiers moved quickly, preparing for the next steps. The commanders needed to hear what had happened, and they needed to hear it now. Liam walked with the Vulpine warrior at his side, his mind focused on what he had to do. This was it, the moment that would determine the future of the war, of both their people. He wasn't sure if the commanders would listen, if they would accept what he was asking of them. But for the first time, he had something that felt worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop fighting and start talking. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he walked through the gates of the military base, flanked by the Vulpine warrior. The rest of the soldiers followed behind him, their eyes filled with uncertainty and doubt. They had made their choice, but the real test was ahead. The commanders, the leaders of the human forces, were not going to easily accept what had happened. The base, which had once been a symbol of human strength and control, now felt cold and unfamiliar. The walls seemed to close in around him as he approached the command center. There were still those among the ranks who believed that the Vulpine were nothing more than bloodthirsty savages, and those voices were loud. The war had been waged for so long that the thought of peace seemed almost impossible. As they entered the command center, the room fell silent. The commanders, senior officers who had fought in countless battles, were sitting around a large table. Their eyes narrowed as they saw the Vulpine warrior standing alongside Liam and his men. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, others clenched their fists, clearly ready to argue. But there was no going back now. Liam stepped forward, his voice steady, but the weight of what he was about to say hung heavily in the air. "We need to talk." One of the commanders, General Markov, the sternest and most battle-hardened of them all, stood up. His eyes flicked between Liam and the Vulpine warrior, suspicion etched on his face. "What is this, Rivers?" he asked, his voice low but filled with authority. "You bring this creature into our command center and expect us to listen? After everything they've done?" Liam swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "They've been fighting for their lives. Just like we have," he said, his voice strong but calm. "They didn't come here to destroy us. They were forced into this. And they're not our enemies." A murmur of disbelief swept through the room. General Markov took a step forward, his face red with anger. "You're asking us to believe that, after everything we've fought for, you want us to trust them? After all the soldiers we've lost? The families? The destruction?" Liam met his gaze, his eyes unwavering. "Yes," he said quietly, the truth weighing on his words. "Because if we don't, we're going to destroy each other. This war has gone on long enough. It's not about winning anymore. It's about surviving." The Vulpine warrior stepped forward, her presence commanding attention as she stood tall, her armor gleaming in the low light of the command center. Her fiery red hair seemed to catch the light in a way that made her appear even more formidable. She looked at General Markov with a calm, steady gaze that spoke volumes. "You think we're monsters," she said, her voice echoing in the room. "But you've never taken the time to understand us. We don't want this war. We never did. We were driven to it, just like you. And now we offer you a chance to end it before it consumes us both." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of something that seemed too good to be true. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of the machinery in the background, and the sound of Liam's breath as he waited for the commanders to respond. Finally, General Markov spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "And what do you want from us? Do you think we can just put down our weapons and forget everything? How do you propose we trust you? You've killed our men. You've burned our cities. You think we'll just forget?" The Vulpine warriors' expression softened, but her resolve remained clear. "No," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "We can't change the past. We can't undo what's been done. But we can stop it from going any further. We can stop this madness before we have nothing left." Liam stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "This war has been built on fear and misunderstanding. We've been told stories about the Vulpine, stories that make you see them as monsters. But that's not who they are. They're survivors, just like us." General Markov looked at Liam for a long moment, his gaze hard. It was clear that he was torn, unsure of what to believe. The Vulpine had been painted as the enemy for so long. The idea that they could now be allies was something that seemed almost impossible to accept. But Liam's words, the sincerity in his voice, began to chip away at the walls the commanders had built around themselves. He could see it in their eyes. There was doubt, but there was also something else: curiosity. Maybe they too had begun to question the reasons for this endless conflict. After a long silence, General Markov finally spoke again. His voice was quieter now, but there was still a hint of skepticism in it. And if we agree to this, if we listen, what then? How do we move forward? The Vulpine warrior stepped forward once more. We will work together to rebuild what was lost. We will share knowledge, resources, and protect each other from what comes next. But first, we need to prove to your people that peace is possible. Liam watched as the room fell silent again. The commanders were deep in thought, processing everything that had been said. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance from both sides. But there was something in this moment, something in the air, that made him believe that peace might be within reach. Finally, General Markov nodded slowly. "All right, Rivers," he said, his voice quieter than before. "We'll listen. We'll give it a chance, but this better not be some kind of trick." Liam felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't over yet. The battle for peace had just begun. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like they were moving in the right direction. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more obstacles ahead. But now they had a chance. The Vulpine warrior nodded. "Thank you. We won't let you down." As Liam and the Vulpine warrior turned to leave, he couldn't help but feel that this was the first step towards something truly incredible. Something that had been impossible only moments before. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid to hope. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The commanders, though skeptical at first, had agreed to take the first steps toward peace. The human forces were cautiously listening, and the Vulpine had made their offer clear. But the task ahead was daunting. The soldiers were still entrenched in their beliefs, and convincing them to abandon the war that had defined their lives was no easy feat. Liam walked through the base with a sense of purpose that had eluded him for months. The soldiers he passed looked at him with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. The base, which had once been a symbol of strength and defense, now seemed more like a place of fragile hope. People were still recovering from the shock of the past few days. It was clear that peace, even tentative, was a hard pill to swallow. Vulpine warrior, whose name Liam had learned was Kale, had remained by his side. Her presence was both reassuring and unnerving. She was a symbol of everything they had fought against, yet in her calm demeanor, Liam saw something that made him believe peace might actually be possible. But even as they spoke of trust and unity, the reality was far more complicated. "Liam," Kale said as they stood near the edge of the camp, watching the soldiers go about their duties. "Do you think they'll really listen? Do you think they'll put down their weapons?" Liam took a deep breath, his gaze focused on the soldiers working around the camp. He had hoped, maybe even prayed, for this moment for so long. But the doubt still lingered. Would they truly listen to the truth? Or would they fall back on what they knew best, fighting? "I don't know," Liam admitted, "but we have to try. We can't give up now, not when we're this close." Kale nodded, her sharp amber eyes scanning the horizon. "You're right, but peace takes more than just words. It takes trust. It takes time." Liam turned to face her, seeing the weariness in her expression. She had fought for so long. She had seen her people's homes destroyed, her friends lost, to a war they never wanted. And now she was here, standing beside the humans who had once been their enemies, asking for peace. It wasn't an easy task for anyone. The first real test of peace came when they brought together a small group of human soldiers and Vulpine warriors. It was a delicate operation. The soldiers were skeptical, their hands still resting on their weapons. They were not ready to just accept what had happened, to suddenly believe that the Vulpine were no longer their enemies. Liam stood at the front, looking out at the mixed group, his heart beating in his chest. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Every soldier, every Vulpine, was waiting to see what would happen next. Today, Liam began, his voice steady. "We're not just here to talk. We're here to show that we're willing to work together. We've all lost something in this war. But if we don't take the first step toward peace, we'll lose everything. And that includes the future of both our peoples." He looked at the soldiers at the Vulpine. It was a silent plea, a call for them to see beyond the battle lines and the propaganda they had grown up with. It was a plea for them to choose something greater than revenge. Kale stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "We're not asking for forgiveness. We're not asking for you to forget what's happened. We're asking for a chance. A chance to build something different, something better." There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. No one moved, no one spoke. And then, one by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The Vulpine warriors did. The same. Liam felt a sense of relief flood over him. This wasn't the end of the war, it wasn't the final piece. But it was a beginning. A step towards something more than just survival. It was a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to stop the endless cycle of violence. Weeks passed, and the fragile peace that had been struck began to take root. There were still challenges, still moments of tension and doubt, but the conversation had shifted. Soldiers and Vulpine alike began to realize that the future didn't have to be one of endless war. They could rebuild together. Liam found himself working alongside Kale in ways he never expected. They began to share knowledge, train together, and even learn from each other's cultures. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of distrust, but they were pushing forward, together, one. Evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Liam and Kale stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the alien landscape. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the air was cool and calm. "We've come a long way," Kale said, her voice softer now. "But there's still a long road ahead." Liam nodded. "I know. But it's a road worth walking." The future was uncertain, and the challenges were many. But for the first time, they had hope. They had a chance to change the course of their worlds. And in the distance, beneath the setting sun, the soldiers and the Vulpine worked side by side, building something new, something that could change everything.